Welcome to Next Play. All right, guys. Today's episode is a little bit different. We're doing an end of the year Q&A. We got Bob and Kat with us. Bob's another one of the sports mindset coaches, and then Kat handles all the marketing and kind of makes this thing work. So,
well, I'll be handling all the questions, and yeah, we'll just be having kind of a roundtable discussion. And my first question is kind of a fun one. I want to know from each of you, what was your favorite mindset moment in professional sports this year?
I can start us off. A little bit more recent. Tyler Kolek with the Knicks. The NBA Cup, whatever you call that, NBA Cup championship, whatever it is.
Was that new this year, that cup thing?
No, it's been whatever, a couple years now. Yeah, but anyway, Tyler Kolek, second year NBA, hasn't had a huge role, and he got a lot more minutes during the tournament and was a crucial part of why the Knicks won it. I made a video actually today that you never know when your number is going to be called. And I think it takes a mentally tough person to be locked in and, not be checked out when they're not getting a lot of minutes. So I would say that was mine.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, I can go, I think one, not a specific moment, but just more like within a sport. Watched a lot of golf this year and just kind of going there and just watching different professionals talk about how they like approach mistakes and what their response is to mistakes and how they go about that. Obviously out on the golf course, but in any sport, you're going to make mistakes, and just like the tools that they're utilizing to come back. Rory talked a lot about visualization, but other athletes talked about, different things they do, and just like kind of normalizing the mistakes that happen within sports, and then like listening through the tools that athletes have to kind of work through that.
How was your golf game this year?
Depended on the day.
Did you say not good, Owen?
I mean,
were you saying my golf game was not good, or your?
That's what your golf game.
I was saying your golf game isn't good. We haven't played. I'm just assuming it's not great.
It was up and down. Some good, some bad. We can play.
Yeah, well, all right. You heard it here on Next Play. Bob and Owen next summer. I have know nothing about golf. I know we get a lot of golfers. That was what I would say, because it's such a mental sport. So mine, I have to do I can't give a professional one right now because there's too many good moments. So I'm going to veer off. And my favorite moment of the year was watching my youngest, Ben, come back from such a terrible injury his junior year, and against probably my biggest rival in high school sports in watching my boys play. He came out and just balled out in front of friends and family. It was a high scoring game for him, but to me, it showed mental toughness watching him, know that all eyes were on him. And it was the same. He actually, his sophomore year ended with a big shot against that same team to go on the furthest run in prospect history. And so it was fun to see him come back and after an injury. So that was my favorite mental moment of the year.
Yeah, I love that. I think flipping it on its side, instead of like your favorite moment, what's a moment in sports this year, and it can be professional or otherwise, that taught you something new about mindset?
I think I was surprised at the elite athletes I worked with, how much they obsess. I had no idea the amount of energy and time they gave to the sport in a way that was hurting them, basically. And obviously my pool of people I'm getting, that's maybe why they're coming. But just the inability to like focus on other aspects of their life and thinking that that's what made them great was this constant thinking about it, and not in them like growing mindset techniques and sort of, I can't stop thinking about it. And so that surprised me. So it really helped me focus on other sides of an athlete and not just the game, just like what other human things do you do besides play the sport? Yeah. So that's something I learned this year.
Yeah, I could go next. I think just from our podcast and having a lot of conversations with elite athletes, I was shocked by how many still don't use like the mindset stuff. Especially the people that are at a really high level. I felt like it was pretty inconsistent with the people that we talked to. Some were really bought into the visualization, breath work, that stuff. And then we had some that kind of used it, but were still like, it was new to them. So I would say that was the most shocking or whatever. The most I learned this year was how inconsistent it was between different athletes.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was actually going to say something pretty similar there. I think it's people who have seen it and been around it are like all in on it, and they have a lot of the tools. And you get to some people who like, they're doing a lot of this stuff. It's just kind of like playing with it to make it work for what's best for them. But then there is like the other side of it, which is like they don't really have any experience. But I think it's the same even, for like fans and people outside it and just people around it, of like recognizing like that we have these skills or we don't have these skills, or recognizing what it takes, and that like professional athletes are doing these things, and just kind of like, again, making everyone aware of what you can be doing to improve, and kind of on that mental side of the game, and to find the edge. And I think, that's what I heard a lot of professional athletes saying, which, surprised me, but didn't surprise me, that this isn't like just the norm, that like people aren't all just doing this to try to find an edge, because it is truly like an edge if you can get it working the way that you want it to. So
Totally.
We probably should have said that Bob is a high school coach and been a basketball. People don't know that. Our listeners don't know that. So he's our program.
I'm the program director. I'm also a high school basketball coach. I also coached baseball in high school for years and years. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And not that the people want to hear this, but even from a marketing perspective, I feel like it's so interesting when I have conversations with people about, what we do at Pure Sports, and how many people almost don't even realize that that's an option of like, oh yeah, like you could be focusing more on your mental game. And yeah, there are definitely people out there that don't even realize that it's something that they could be doing or that they should be doing. And so I think, as the space grows, more people will continue to kind of realize how cool of a thing it is and how impactful it can be. But yeah, super interesting for sure with the athletes that we've talked to this year, definitely. Kate, you kind of touched on this with your last answer. So if you want to expand on it or give something else, but what is the number one thing that you heard from the athletes that you worked with this year? Maybe it was like struggling with confidence or dealing with burnout, fear of failure, anything up any of those? Yeah,
definitely the negative self-talk. Like I was telling the person this morning, a lot of athletes will say, or give an example of, oh, I dropped 2 balls and I told myself I can't drop another one. I suck. And I guess it doesn't really surprise me, because me as a former athlete, that's kind of the same way that I thought. And I think it's super natural. But yeah, I'd say that's definitely across all the people that I've talked to, the number one thing. And I think it's probably the hardest to switch that, just because it takes a lot of work, I feel like, and a lot of mental toughness to change that habit. But yeah, over the course
on that, because truly, did you do that? Because were you that, like, would you say I suck? Because I
wouldn't say more I suck. It was more like, you better not miss the next one, or like you start to feel the heat. I don't know. You miss 4 free throws and you go up and shoot the 5th. You definitely have those thoughts in your head. Like I wasn't like, oh great. Like I definitely was not a positive self-talk guy. But I would say I wasn't as bad as others.
Yeah,
but I think, again, anyone, like I don't know if
that's normal.
They're probably lying to you if they say they don't have any sort of whatever pressure in their head that they're putting on themselves.
Yeah, for more context, Bob coached Owen for how many years?
A lot.
Yeah, a long time. I don't know.
No, would you have said that?
5th grade.
Like about Owen?
I think it's hard to know, even as a coach. And this is, I think learning your players and going from there. Like I can't be in their head. I can't know what they're saying to themselves. So I think, the one thing probably Owen did, and I think something that we encourage all our athletes to do, is like, not, even if it's there, not show it, externally. And I think O did a good job with that, and that doesn't mean that I don't think he was talking. I mean, I think at times I do that, and I think so it's natural, but I think your response to that is what is kind of what allows you to kind of work through that, or for it to kind of domino into something bad, right? Like the negative, self-talk then leading to negative, like body language and, negative, like like discouragement and disappointment, like if that's where you're going to go, it's just going to snowball. Where if you like, you know, can kind of change it inside and not show it as much outside, I think that's where like you don't lose. It's still something to fix, but you don't lose much.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
You have an answer, I'm sure, for what you've seen most, I don't know, this year.
Yeah. I mean, I could go, I think there's a couple of ways to go. I think right now, one of the things that I'm seeing is like athletes feel this pressure, kind of like we said, you know, to constantly be doing something to improve themselves. And I think right now, when I talk to athletes, it's constantly like a physical thing. Like, what can I physically do to improve myself? Or I'm going to go, you know, shoot and shoot and shoot, or I'm going to go hit and hit, you know. And I think we just have to encourage athletes to continue to be like intentional with the work that they're putting in. I think sometimes like athletes just think that I'm going to go, you know, hit for 5 hours and that's going to make me. And it's like, what are the quality of those reps? And are there things that you could be doing to give your body a break, you know, but still improve those things? And I think that's where like the visualization and the different things, I've encouraged my athletes to like take some of those things of like, hey, like if you're constantly going, one, it's draining on your body. But I think the other part we need to, you know, factor in is it's like a lot of athletes, just the way things are shifting, are focusing on one sport, you know. So if you're doing it year round, are you ever giving yourself a break? And just like also allowing them to be like, it's all right to give yourself a physical break sometimes. Like, I would rather you spend 20 minutes, you know, shooting full speed, work coming off of screens, right, coming off the dribble, than just sit there and stationary shoot for, you know, an hour. And so I think it's just like helping athletes, they feel the pressure that they have to constantly be doing something. But then it's like, all right, constantly be doing something that actually is going to be helping you. So,
yeah, actually, I have a second thought now on my answer. But at least for my clients, I think a lot of them have come in expecting it to be like a quick fix, like a 1 hour session, and then they're all good to go. And even myself, I've learned that it's a skill like anything else, and you got to put a lot more than just an hour into it. So I don't know. That's just something that I thought of while Ryan was talking.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say for me is the metrics seem unreasonable sometimes. And so all of us work really hard to metric success through the mental side of the game, and not just, I'm going to give more effort, or I'm just going to do breath work. That's where working with us is more like, where are you going to implement the breath work? And so that's something that I think confidence is where we get people when they're low in confidence, and we're trying to instill it through like the skill building component. So yeah. What else you got?
That totally makes sense. The next question that I wanted to ask kind of branches even off of that one of if there was a mindset technique that this year became more important, or maybe you were sharing it a lot more than you have in previous years. Or maybe it's a new thing that you started doing this year that you haven't done before with your athletes.
I think I've leaned into visualization the most this year. And I think it's because in the beginning, it felt a rejection of that's weird. And now it's been more normalized. And also, I think I'm explaining it in a way that's digestible. So especially when Bob and I do team talks, he's very specific. He'll guide the visualization, but it's only 15 to 30 seconds. So I think, you know, having them, what skill are you trying to get better at, right? Or remember a great moment if we're trying to build confidence in, you know, like their shot or whatever. And only 15 to 30 seconds explaining it very clearly. What are the details? All this stuff. Maybe it was listening to Bob, actually, you know, that helped me then translate it to my athletes. It was probably that. Yeah, I've used that more.
I'm going to sit this question out, Ryan. You got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think breath work's always one of my first go-to, but if you're asking me where, again, like I've tried to utilize more, and it probably has been that visualization piece as well for me. And I've been using it more, and I think it's been really helpful for a lot of the athletes I've worked with as a confidence builder, you know, of like when things aren't going well, you know, like whether it's a hockey player, like you're just not making the right read or doing the right thing. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of athletes about like, hey, like just go, you know, watch film of yourself doing it wrong and then visualize yourself doing it right, and just kind of with the advancement of film, honestly, like pretty much everyone can watch themselves play and look at their mistakes. So I think that makes it easier to like, hey, see yourself do it wrong and then picture yourself, doing it what you would rather have done, the next time it comes. And I think, I've had a lot of athletes say like, that's just been helpful of like, I was making this wrong read or doing this wrong. And then I, watched myself do it. And even if it's like a skill, like where you're shooting a puck or where you're, how you're shooting a ball and just seeing yourself do it the way you want it to feel, and just using that as an opportunity to visualize, I think is, a big one. I think some of the other ones, I think like, Kate said, are easier to implement. I think the visualization takes some buy-in. I think thought replacement and things like that, like you can definitely get athletes like understanding the benefit of that. But I've also, found myself using, thought replacement a lot and just the idea of, right, not just being positive, but being productive with your thoughts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're not known as Mr. Positive either.
I'm not. Well, you could ask my players that this morning.
I can fact check that. It's true.
Didn't seem like you do a lot of fact checking there, though.
He did. He just quickly typed it out over there. That does actually, before you go, create a lot of buy-in when we talk about thought replacement in groups. All of three of us have said this. If we try and jump to a positive thought from, let's just go with Owen's example earlier, I suck, to something like, you got this. It doesn't work for athletes that have low confidence. They look at us like, so when we say just be productive, you can see their eyes be like, oh, I can do that. Like I can have a productive thought. So yeah, I would say that's another big one that we do a lot of. Just that language difference helps.
For sure. And keeping it rolling with the positivity message. What's one moment for each of you that reminded you why you love working with athletes, or a moment that like really kind of fulfilled you, that it was like maybe you had an athlete have a breakthrough on something that you've been working on, or you had something along those lines that just like really fed your love for teaching mindset coaching and teaching athletes how to lock in and play in the moment and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think I can start. I think originally I had a lot of clients that were like one time, have a session and then, stay in touch, whatever, over the phone. But the best for me was when I had a reoccurring client, and it was like, cause I wanted to come back. And the reason they wanted to come back is cause something was working or they were starting to buy in. And I've had a couple of those, and I think those just naturally feel the best when you can see and hear from the person that the stuff you're working on is working. So I'd say for me, that's the best feeling, but I don't know.
Are you thinking of that one hockey player specifically, right?
Yeah, that was my guy.
Yeah. That's your guy. Well, you were getting lots of texts even. I think what differentiates us a little is we try and really be available. So, pregame, Owen's getting texts and like hyping him up. And it's a space for a lot of athletes where they can talk about the mental side instead of just the physical stuff. And I think, I don't know, I've seen that with coaches, and I knew that was the kid you were thinking of. So for me, it was a team thing. I was working with a group of young women and talking about how you mentally defeat your opponent. And it was as if they never heard that term before, or that idea. And the buy-in was immediate. And me explaining, how do you know when another team is mentally, crashing out, to steal a younger term, or losing it, and really educating them on that through their own skill building. They could see when another team was starting to lose it. And so I went to that game. It was a huge rival game. It was flag football, and they saw one of their best, someone on the other team that was the best player, drop her head. And they ran off the field, and I was on the sideline, and they're like, we got her. And it was great because they leaned in. They honestly, pedal the metal kind of mindset, and they beat a huge rival, and it was fun to see. So that was a great moment for me, and for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think any of the times, working with athletes where you see them like coming back to you for more, is always nice. And I think, again, like we're always texting with athletes and trying to get there. And some of them really want to share how things went. And I think that's where you're like, okay, they're wanting to do this. They're trying to do it. They're trying to like figure out how it would work for them. So I think, whenever they come back to us, I think is always, a good thing that like they want to continue to do it. But, I think just in talking to athletes and having like a second session or something after where they're like, yeah, that worked. Or like, I tried this, or even some of the times where they're like, well, I didn't do it exactly like how we talked about it, but I did it in this way, and that's kind of, again, like, this is all individualized. Like you got to find what works for you. And so I think like when they start to like take what you're talking about and find a way to make it work for them specifically and what they do, has kind of always been nice. Just
you had that good golfer story. Can you tell that one?
Which one?
I know.
That's my mom's notorious for that.
I know they hate when I
just like bringing up a story you have no idea about and then just tossing it on.
No. You know that one golfer that was having like the yips or whatever he was having, and then
I mean, yeah, I think I did work with a golfer who like was just couldn't find it off the tee and couldn't do all these things and was like really, bought in. And we just kind of talked through a bunch of things of like what he could do. And again, like just mapping out the course to use visualization, just like feeling certain shots and just like walking through almost, I feel like kind of became a distraction to a degree of like, instead of being so focused on like failing, right? Like this is somewhere I can put my focus on of like preparation, right? Like what can I do to prepare for the moment, and then respond. And they did, report back that they had a nice like next time out. So I mean, those are always fun to hear, when they see the success. And then it's, I think just always working with athletes too, to also realize that it's also not going to work every single time. Right. And it's just like, that's the build. And that was working with that athlete. Something that we kind of went back and forth was you saw a level of success and then there was a little setback and then there's success and then there's setback, and just like understanding that like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is going to happen. As long as that's happening more than there are 2 back, 1 forward, you're making steps in the right direction. So.
Yeah, it is fun. Also, I want to add, it's really fun when you get an athlete that's suffering, like really suffering, right? And something like breathing gets them to be in the moment. Even if they're not physically, succeeding, they're not in this hell in their mind. And I would say those moments to me are huge. And I've had a handful of those this year.
Yeah. Well, here's to more moments like those in 2026, right?
Yep.
Yes.
I think looking forward then into the new year, because this episode is dropping on the 1st, so we have to kind of look ahead. What is one misconception around mindset training or mental toughness in general that you wish every athlete would let go of going into the new year?
I think there's a misconception that some kids just have it. And here's the thing. Yes, there are kids that are, not as negative, right, in their self-talk or whatever, but everybody meets fear and everybody meets failure, every athlete. And so the idea that somebody just is mentally tough, naturally, it's like, yes, everyone has a different starting point. Bob and I just had this conversation last week. There's a different starting point, but everyone has room for growth. And there is, because of social media or whatever, this idea that some people just are mentally like solid. And I think they have to know they're working at it on some level.
Yeah. One that I always tell my athletes, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but like, it's not a magic trick. Like you don't implement this stuff one time and it's like, oh, I'm going to shoot 100% from the field or whatever. Like the reality is, it is hard. It is hard to implement this stuff and consistently implement it. So I think that for me is, I don't know, maybe my own misconception. I think maybe originally when I first started, I was like, maybe it isn't that hard, but I think that's the number one thing that I learned. Yeah. Like it takes a lot of effort and it's a skill and it's something that you got to consistently work at.
It's so funny. I saw a TikTok on Jalen Brunson, And I think he scored 37 the other night. And after, post game, or 40, whatever, he scored something crazy. And the post game interview, he said, well, what did you do? What was so different about tonight? Okay. And he looks and goes, the ball went in. And it made me laugh because it was so outcome based on the number, right? And he was trying to say, like, sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. But no one ever asks about the mental side. So anyway, does anyone think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's still, even though it's getting better and better, I think there's still this perception that, like, if you're needing these skills or you're having to do these things, it's like because you're not good, or like you're soft, or like you're like whatever. And I think it's just like that perception is still out there, and just kind of combating that. I think some of the people, some of the athletes that are at the top of their game are the ones that are doing this, and it's not all of them, right? It's not, there are athletes who can get by on their physical tools, but I think it's starting to get there. So I think we're still at the, younger levels, still kind of combating some of that. And I think it's just athletes being a little hesitant to like jump on board with this, and we see it with our athletes when we've worked with teams, just like this being uncomfortable with trying something that they're like questioning if other people are looking at them and being like, this is like, why would you do that? That makes you like soft, or and so I think it's just, that's a misconception to me, is like that this makes you soft. I think this is like what makes you even tougher, and I think, we talk a lot about physical toughness, but I think, the physical toughness is the easier one. Like if you're asking people to be physically tough or mentally tough, I think the physical toughness is probably the easier one. So
yeah,
I agree with that for sure.
100%. And I think it's interesting what you said is that, yeah, it's kind of almost like this trickle down of like these top athletes, whether it's Rory or Simone Biles or whoever else it may be, speaking up more and more about this stuff to make the younger athletes realize that it's something that they can do and that they can use, and that it doesn't, like you said, make them softer or weaker, whatever it may be.
But you don't even have like a crash, right? Like some of the people that have come out historically have spoken about like some mental illness, right? And like which is different than what we're talking about a little bit. And it doesn't have to be that you're like, full crash out in order to come do some of the stuff. So yeah,
for sure. If you guys could give each athlete one mindset technique or piece of advice surrounding mindset, mental toughness, for the new year, what would it be?
My number one thing would be to start with, what does support look like to them? And I think because I see a dip in communication and a lack of insight and knowing, what does an athlete need? That's something you have to figure out. What do you need from your coaches, your teammates, your parents? And starting there, I think is, really helpful, because once you can identify that, you can, sort of have that background and accountability in this mental side. So that's
I think mine would be like, just start. Like you don't need to do whatever, a million things day one, but start with something like what my mom, I think I mentioned earlier, that maybe naturally comes easy to you, and just be consistent with it. And then, you can add more tools as you go. But I think the biggest thing is for athletes just to start. And so that's what I would encourage people to do, maybe for a little New Year's resolution.
Yeah, that's probably the best way. That's probably the best answer we can give. But, I think when we look at athletes, I think we've talked about like metrics and what they want. And I think that's especially, as you work with athletes that are all in different points, like you have some that are trying to be the top level, and you have other athletes who are just trying to compete, at the level they're currently at. And I think, defining what they want for themselves is a big piece, because I think it helps set up some expectations for them as they approach things. And that's one of the, making sure that what they're doing lines up with the goals that they have, and what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that's sometimes where we see a lot of disconnect. And that disconnect comes with parents and with coaches. And like, I say it as a coach, all the time. Like want my athletes to be to a certain level and to keep pushing and get further and further and further. But at the same time, like at times that's just not what the athlete wants. And you're kind of in a helpless position. And I feel like athletes sometimes put themselves in that helpless position where they don't know what they're actually trying to achieve, right? Like what their goal is. So I think, if you kind of outline that goal for yourself, it kind of then dictates the rest of it. You can kind of work backwards from it. Like if your goal is to be a starter, okay, well, what do you need to be a starter and what's going to allow you to do those things? And I think kind of that backwards working sometimes is important. And then it's kind of a measure that, you can line yourself up with and be like, all right, if I'm not having success, right, what am I not doing? Or if I want to have success and it's not going the way, well, I said I want this, so I need to be doing this, this, and this. So I think just that metric and understanding, what your ultimate, like what your achievement is, what are you trying to get done? So
yeah.
Bribes always has some wise words of wisdom.
That's what I'm known for. Very, very wise.
You are.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
Well, perfect, because we need to end with some more wise words of wisdom. As our listeners know, we always ask our guests how they would define mental toughness. And Kate and Owen, you both did it in the first episode of Next Play. But Bob, the people need to know, how would you define mental toughness?
I love putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it can be defined in a lot of ways. For me, it's just like how you respond and how you work through to find a way to get something done. I think too often we think that like mental toughness and like success is going to be like clean, and it's just usually not. So like, to me, it's just how you're responding and what you do to find a way out of this situation you're in that's going to allow you to be, successful. I just think it's kind of a little bit of grind. It's keeping yourself, in the right mental state to do it. But there is a physical part of it when we talk to sports, but letting that, mental toughness lead the physical side. So
good answer.
Nice.
It was, especially being put on the spot. That was a good answer. Because you can see some of our guests be like, oh gosh, what do I say?
Yeah, Kat, what do you got for us?
For mental toughness? Hold on, I was actually thinking about this because I was like, I bet you they're going to put me on the spot and force me to answer this.
That's always Owen.
I think when I was thinking about this, I feel like one thing that kept coming back to mind was something that my dad always said to us growing up, which was that discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And I think that is a huge part of mental toughness, is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And then sort of piggybacking off of what you said, Bob, is your response to adversity and how are you going to get through your adversity? And so I think it's kind of like both sides of that and pushing through even when, it's super hard. So there you have it.
There we go, Kat.
One of the things we didn't touch on, by the way, is, and I think it's really important, is embarrassment is such a driver of like fear, and I think that, I don't know, none of us touched on that, but I think that really is what stops athletes from trying new things. I mean, and you did a little bit, Bob, I think, when you were talking about like looking around, but I think in just all aspects, like if someone feels embarrassed, they're like, I'm never going to do that again, and I think riding that is something we're all trying to teach. So anyway, I just wanted to add that a little bit. Yeah. I was thinking about
the failure, like avoiding failure, is definitely something I think, we're working through in athletics. I think we're working through it in schools and just different things like that. Like that failure is like the end of it, when really it's supposed to be like the next step that we take. But I think we're definitely, dealing with that. And I think that is something that makes it, hard for athletes to push through things. Like if you talk about like finding a way out, it's like sometimes I'm not even willing to try to find a way because that way might fail and I might have to go find a different way.
For sure. Yeah.
That's all the questions that we have. And
Great.
that was our look back for 2026. Kate, if you always end out the episodes, I feel like you got to end out the last one for 2025.
Well, thanks everybody for doing this year end, especially Coach Reibel, who I know This will be the only time we get him on the podcast. So thank you for joining us with all your wisdom, as Owen said, and join us next time on Next Play for more athletes talking about the mental side of the game. Also, if you're looking for a mindset coach like Owen or Bob, check us out at puresportsmindset.com or on Instagram at puresportsmindset. Looking forward to seeing you guys in the new year.